Okay.
Okay, I do believe we are live. Hello, everyone. I don't think there's many people in the chat. I think there's uh, two people, which is myself and Sarah. And I apologize for such short notice, everyone, because it is, yeah, it was something that's kind of been thrown between myself and Fay, who is, yeah,
Hi.
so it's something that's been going on. There's another couple of people that I've got in the background sort of waiting, but one of those people fell through, and then it was like a last minute thing. So hopefully more people will join in on the chat shortly. But in the meantime, Faye, would you like to introduce yourself?
So, hi, I'm Fay the Most Gracious. I have a YouTube channel where I don't necessarily talk about science stuff, which I know you love talking about. I'm not the most, I want to say scientifically literate. I think I don't know. I wouldn't even consider myself a scientific person because I'm very much on the artsy spectrum, if you couldn't tell. But I'm interested in science. I'm currently a psychology student, which I know a lot of people may argue is not a science. But for me, as someone who isn't scientific, it definitely feels like a science. But I think the reason why we wanted to start this was because you checked out my video on abortion, and I had quite a few opinions to state. And a lot of my opinions, even though I don't like being the person on the fence, I think a lot of my opinions are very much I'm on the fence about this because I don't like because people will ask me a question and I can't simply be like yes and no. I have to fully think it out, and I still haven't fully thought out abortion because I don't think it's a simple thing to decide on for anybody, and I also don't think that people are just out here trying to get abortions. So you said that there's other aspects that go into late-term abortion. So that's more what I wanted to discuss because I think I've more or less made my mind up about early-term abortions, that I think that they should be legal, and that something like that is just, nobody wants to do it. It's just a case of like you not being able to look after a child, and then you make that decision. Or there's the slightly more fringe cases where people are raped and they, conceive, and other things like that. But in terms of late term abortions, I was more on the fence about. I was more like, I don't think that that should be a thing. But you said that you stated that there are reasons for it, so that's what I wanted to discuss because I'm sitting here, I want to learn, and genuinely I want to understand, but sometimes I read something scientific and it just doesn't go through my brain. It's just like I'm reading words and not understanding them. So sometimes it just helps for me to hear it from somebody else, but I also understand that it might also be helpful for other people to listen to as well. So that's why I'm starting this conversation as one ignorant to someone who's more knowledgeable. So,
well, you made a couple of good points in that. First of all, science is a very scary subject for a lot of people, and that is where people like myself, not that I call myself a science communicator, but I do talk a lot about science because science is cool. But people like scientist Mel, she's also an extremely good science communicator. Then you've got, Brian Cox, who is one of the sexiest men alive. Here, come on. And there's a lot of really important science communicators, and we need more of them. We need more science communicators out there because there's so much information out there that is just not true. I mean, I don't know if you've watched any of my science-based videos, but I've got that thimerosal video out there that I put up a couple of weeks ago about that mercury-containing compound that in vaccines that people say causes autism, which it obviously doesn't.
No.
And we need more voices out there as science communicators to be able to go, hey, here's actually what science says, and break it down. To learn, to teach people the things about science that aren't scary, because science is not actually, once you get into it, not a very scary subject. So yes, thank you.
I think this is a good way to start the topic before we even get into abortion, just to explain the science thing, because the reason why I find, well, I wouldn't say I find it scary, but it is intimidating for me. The reason why I find it intimidating is because growing up, science wasn't something that was prioritized because, I was a fundamentalist. I never took science seriously. And there were a lot of things that are, important and factual, like, for example, evolution, which is a big topic within people who believe in creation and things like that. We were just told, oh, don't take this seriously. It's just something you have to learn to pass an exam, and it's not something important for other things. So for me, even though I shouldn't look at science in that way, even now, I kind of do. Like, I kind of just think, oh, this is an opinion, and it's just like, no, it isn't an opinion. And I think it's really, really important.
It's reality.
Yeah, precisely. Like, there are other things that within myself I understand is delusional, but I'll still go along with it as if it's not. And I don't want to give examples because I really don't want to embarrass myself today. I've done enough of that in recent years. But I think that the one thing that turns people off from science is that it's quite cold and not nuanced. And that's what I particularly find intimidating about it, and why I wasn't very attracted to it, because I love learning about it, but then when it comes to like stating it as a fact, I just become like there's no other way about it. I'm just like trapped in this understanding of it. And like, I mean, I have a Jurassic Park poster up there, but one of the reasons why I love like paleontology and like learning about dinosaurs is that there's so many gaps, and I can just make things up in there. Well, not realistically, but there's like a lot of mystery, and I enjoy it. But when it's like science, I just feel like, oh well, that just takes the fun out of everything. Like, I learned about so one thing that I used to believe in that I don't believe in anymore is like destiny. But I would take like these really crazy coincidences and be like, oh yeah, that was like fated. I don't believe in that anymore, but I used to believe in it quite heavily. Like, I'm someone who sees signs and like, well, not sees signs, but like, will take something as a sign and then go along with it, when really it's just, oh, that thing happened and then you did something else, and it's only significant to you because you think it's significant, you give meaning to it. But that just like took the magic out of so much of my life. And I was just like, okay, so I'm not important. I'm not important. Just these important things don't happen to me.
Okay.
I just think they're important. So yeah, that's why I've had like this struggle with science and the things that science holds. And I'm like kind of scared by it because it hasn't taken magic out of it. I'm just delusional.
It's not that you're not important. You are important.
Yeah,
everyone is important. But it's just, Anyway, so let's get onto some of the things that I don't want to say you were wrong, because that's the wrong way to put about it. But misinformed maybe, or just I don't. If I do say wrong, I don't mean it that you are a horrible person and therefore you should be ashamed of yourself. I mean, it's more of a
is
something that And I want to say, first of all, thank you for saying I want to learn. One of the worst things at the moment for everybody is that no one wants to learn. Nobody wants to. Everyone's just like, la, 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 I'm right, you're wrong. And that's,
it's really
I think,
annoying.
it's one, really annoying, and two, probably part of the reason why we're looking at some of the issues that we're seeing today, because of all of our cognitive biases and stuff like that. So thank you so much for having the open mind and for being, hey, I want to learn. I just want to say thank you so much. That's a really important thing. Okay, so first of all, one of the things that you said about abortion is that you weren't, if you said, and I will quote, by the time you're 20 weeks pregnant, you should know by now that you are pregnant and you should have made up your mind.
Yeah.
First of all, a lot of people, I know this sounds crazy, but a lot of people actually don't find out that they're pregnant until about that period of time, because a lot of women actually have sort of irregular periods. Some women can go 2 to 3 months without having a period. So sometimes women don't even know. There's a type of pregnancy that some women have experienced where they still get their periods and then they end up finding out they're pregnant when they're giving birth. It's extraordinarily rare. It's extraordinarily rare, but
it's funny you say that, because I'm someone who experiences irregular periods, and I've had many pregnancy scares in my day because of that, and there's been no baby ever. So that's just something that just flew over my head and I didn't think about. But also my mother's last pregnancy, because my mother's been pregnant quite a few times. There's 6 of us, and she also had a miscarriage. So essentially there would have been 7 of us. But in her final pregnancy, she didn't know she was pregnant until about, I think, 5 months. Because, well, I could tell because all of her moods just shifted.
Wow.
And at that point, like, I was so used to her being pregnant that I was like, there's no way you're not pregnant. She got really mad that I thought that she was pregnant. But it's really funny that you say that, because that completely flew over my head. It just wasn't something that I thought about, because logically, when you think about it, you're pregnant, you'd think that women would know, but there are so many like smaller things that you don't consider in that.
Yeah. So in that sense of the word, that's something that needs to be taken into account. I have a friend who found out she was pregnant at 15 weeks or something like that. She wanted to get an abortion, but they almost said, no, you can't have one. Yeah. So Tia, I'm sorry, Tia Lisa. Sorry if I pronounced your name incorrectly. She said, I'm assuming that you are also female. I apologize if I misgendered you as well. One of my best friends had her period, but she found out pretty late. Thankfully, she didn't have any problems. Yeah, so it does occasionally happen. As I said, it's not a common thing, but some women don't find out they're pregnant until. Awesome, Tia Lisa. Yeah, so that's one of the things that I have an issue when people start putting time periods on pregnancies of at this period of time you can't have an abortion, and it's sort of not taking into account all of the reasons why some women might not know that she's pregnant, or they the pregnant person. Sorry, I'm including trans men in this one as well. So that's one problem. And yeah, as you said, with your own personal experience, and just you do forget that can happen. Another thing that you mentioned was that you're a little bit iffy about, you said your cutoff point was 20 weeks, weren't you? Didn't you? Yeah. That's fairly common, because a lot of people argue that you can give birth to a 20-week-old fetus, and Doorknob Head says arbitrary time periods, one size fits all time periods. But a lot of people's cutoff point is around 20 weeks, because if a woman gives birth to a 20-week-old fetus, due to our technology happening, the baby can develop in humidity cribs and tend to be reasonably okay at that point of time. Myself personally, I actually think it should be up more like 26 weeks of age. And the reason being, and I mentioned this in my abortion video that I did for Unholy Sarah, I just sort of added some extra information on to her video on abortion, because she did a really good job. If I remember, I'll drop it down into the description. In the brain of a person. So we'll go to end of life to talk about the beginning of life. So when somebody has a severe brain injury, they get their ECG, which is their electrocardiogram.
Is that the machine?
One that looks at the brain, the EEG, the electro and.
Oh, okay, yeah, with the electrodes and the hat.
Yeah, the hat one. So it's the EEG, so the electroencephalogram. That's it. Sorry, ECG is the heart, electroencephalogram.
Yeah, because I was thinking.
And if they don't pick up any. Yeah, the stickers are for the heart. Very, very confusing.
Sorry.
So, Unholy Sarah says 24 weeks. So the EEG, if they stick the EEG on someone's head and they can't find any brain activity or very, very little, that person is considered dead. Because what happened years and years ago, we used to say that the cessation of the heart beating is when people die. But due to advances in technology, we are able to get a person's heart to start pumping again and working again, and bring them back to life. So that person may have no heart at all, but their brain is still going. And if you can keep the oxygen running to the brain while that person's heart has stopped, they're going to come out fine. I've heard of people having CPR performed on them, no heartbeat, for 30 minutes and coming out completely fine because the CPR has still got the oxygen running to the brain. If there's no activity in the brain, that means that the person is dead. Doesn't matter if the heart's still beating. You can't revive somebody who has no electrical impulses in their brain. They're dead. That's now officially the point where they have the cutoff for death. So because that is of course called brain death. And in that video that I did, I talked about something called the Lazarus reflex. And basically the person picks their arms up and puts their arms on their chest. And that person has no brain activity. And those are just random neuronal firings happening in the arms and stuff, because our central nervous system is our brain and our spinal cord. But am I going too fast, or are you following along with me?
I'm like creeped out. So
I know, it's
okay.
really fucking
Give me a second. So the brain stops working, and if for some reason the heart is still pumping and there's still reflexes and things going on in the body, they actually cross their arms over their chest. And that's something that has been recorded like multiple times.
Yeah.
That's insane. And creepy.
Yeah. I know. And that's because a lot of, when you touch a hot stove and before you even recognize that the stove is hot, you yanked your arm away.
Yeah.
You've done that before? Yeah. And so what that is that the nerve from your arm goes to your spinal column. Your spinal column goes, oh shit, take your arm away. And then it goes back down to your arm. If it was to go all the way up to your brain to get processed and come back down, you'll be burnt. So there's signaling. I know.
That makes so much sense. But I thought like the brain and the spinal cord were like the same. I don't want to say the same thing, but they were like the same thing. Like I thought that I didn't know that they were like separate. Right.
No, they're the same. It's basically if I was put into an analogy, it'd be like the postman putting something at your front door and then walking away versus the postman putting something coming up the stairs and knocking on your door. If you live in an apartment, knocking on your door to give it to you. It's just a quicker thing, if that makes sense. Yeah. Right. So it's the same. The same system. Is
there like a little brain that?
No, it's not a little brain. It's a part of your central nervous system. Right.
Sorry, I'm just like, to give everybody a perspective of how ignorant on science I am. Like, I went to a school that didn't do any experiments ever. Like, we just learned from textbooks. And I work in a school. Like, I'm an educator, obviously not in science, but in other things. And like, one of the teachers in the science labs like turned on a Bunsen burner and she just walked away from it. And I stared at it like, are we meant to turn that off? Isn't that a fire hazard? She was like, no. The kids aren't going to go and touch it. Like, it's fine. I was looking at it like it was magic. Like, there's a fire in a classroom and it's fine. Like that's how.
Exactly.
Like I'm just ignore me. Just listen to
No,
my mind.
it's gonna. This is probably gonna blow. The science behind this is going to make you just go on. It's like I'm gonna have to watch this again. Yeah. So the thing is with the heart, because it's part of your autonomic nervous system, because you've got two.
Yeah.
You've got I'm deliberately waving my arms around. That's my decision. Although we could go and say it's not, but that's a different story. But I can't control my heart or my stomach or anything, and that's called your autonomic nervous system. So sometimes there's this part of your head that back here. Sorry, you've turned away from the mic. So back here, you've got I can't remember the name of this area of the brain. I can't remember.
The cerebral cortex.
That's it. Yep. Well done, you.
Yay!
Yay. Tia Lisa makes a really good point. Isn't the frog legs and the octopus limbs moving during cooking? Yes, you can. If you sever frog legs and you pour salt on them when they're fairly new, the sodium in the salt actually makes the muscles twitch. It's really creepy. And the same with octopus legs. It just, it's weird.
They just bounce.
But there's still energy left in those nerves to have those muscles continuing working. So the back of the brain is right at the bottom, that little chunky bit right at the bottom of the brain. When it's the bit that controls your heart, your breathing, your digestion. It's that part of your brain. If you have a stroke in that area of your brain, could be very lethal, because that will destroy your ability to breathe, basically. There is, I can't remember what the names, it's someone's curse, where if you damage a part of that part of your brain, your ability to breathe needs to be, you have to think all the time, you got to breathe, because your breathing won't, you have to think constantly about breathing. And it's someone's curse, because you basically either die of sleep deprivation, because you'll choke, you'll die because the autonomous part of your breathing doesn't happen. The reason why I bring this part up is because in brain dead people, the cerebral cortex, the high functioning areas of the part of the brain which makes you, if that's got no neuronal activity, but this part in the back of your head does, that means you're still breathing, your heart's still breathing, you've still got a digestive system happening. So you're alive by the concept of your heart's beating, so therefore you're alive, but you're not. And that's another form of brain death. So you've got two types, where your brain is completely dead, the whole thing's shut down, and the only reason you're alive is because you're on machines. And then you've got the other type where this bit's still okay, but
the rest of
and
it
the
isn't.
people who are brain dead, and people who are brain dead are very big candidates for organ transplants, because their organs are still alive, but they're not. So that's
so sad.
end of life.
Sorry.
If I know it's horrible, it's
so
awful. I know it's awful. It's absolutely awful. Tia Lisa says, "Is that why passing out when you have a severe concussion is so bad?" I'm not sure. I think the reason why, if you have a severe concussion and passing out, is that you're in shock. I think that's part of the reason why, but I don't quote me on it. I don't know anything about it, but it is really bad. If you hit your head and then you go to sleep, that's not good. You should go and get yourself checked out at the hospital.
Yeah.
If you've had a severe head cut and then you start getting sleepy, because there could be something severely wrong with you. And if you hit your head really hard and you've still got a nasty headache a couple of days later, go see your doctor as well. Very important, because you might be experiencing a brain bleed. So just be really worried about those things. When you go, anyway, so that's the end of life. That is the brain death. So I've explained what brain death is. Beginning of life in the fetus at 24 weeks is when 24 to 26 weeks is when the brain waves of a person who is alive, i.e. not brain dead, is working. Like that's when they're picking up the brain waves. So a lot of people, a lot of scientists are going, okay, that's when a baby is technically alive, because if that's our cutoff point for someone who is dead, that should be our cutoff point for when someone is alive. Hi, Dylan. Dylan says, hey, it's 2 a.m. here in South Africa. I need to go to bed, but wanted to check in to say hello.
It's
anyway,
here, so.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll try and keep this quick.
No, it's fine.
Anyway.
I'm learning a lot, and I think I've already changed my opinion on 20 weeks because that makes a lot of sense. Because what I had initially, like, I guess, envisioned was that at 20 weeks, there's a lot of processes going on, and it's a viable fetus. Like, you can take it out of the mother's belly, and it can more or less be sustained. So that's what I was originally thinking. And personally, and I guess, like,
I can see that argument as well. I can see that argument.
And I think personally, and I know what I personally think doesn't apply to everybody, but personally, if I knew that I didn't want a pregnancy and I was already at 20 weeks, I would probably see it through and then take whatever measures I had to take, whether raising it or giving it away to adoption or whatever. So that was my thinking process. But you're right. I think that if the cutoff point for what is considered to be dead is brain waves within the top part of your brain, then I guess that follows as what the starting point of life should be.
Yeah. So it's clearly the person's decision. I mean, I can see that argument, and I don't know if this is me personally knowing the science behind it also, but if at 20 weeks of age we are able to remove the fetus from the mother and have, but that's when it starts getting grey. The 20-week mark is when it starts getting grey. But at 24 to 26 weeks tends to be when the brainwave starts developing. But the vast majority of women do know that they're pregnant at that time. So let's go on to another thing that another point that a lot of people bring up, and is a bit of a sticking point, and that's the 20-week mark. So if a woman has an ultrasound at 20 weeks of age, if you go no abortions, full stop, you can't have a child at all at 20 weeks. The 20-week mark is when you have a point where you're like, okay, let's do the ultrasound. Oh, we just found out that you have a severe abnormality of the baby. So before then, the baby's developing. But at 20 weeks, that's when you can start seeing the toes and the fingers and the skeletal system. And that's when you find this out. That's if you've got spina bifida, if you've got, I can't remember what it's called, but basically it sounds basically like a misplaced skeleton. I can't remember the name of the disorder.
But scoliosis?
No, not scoliosis. It's something a lot worse. It's a form of I hate this word, dwarfism. It's a form of dwarfism where the skeleton itself is just completely screwed around, and it is a fatal abnormality of the skeleton of the fetus. That's when you find out if your baby has Down syndrome and all of those developmental problems. So with Down syndrome, again, there's that argument of, a person with Down syndrome is you know, can still live a very happy life. I work with people in disabilities, and yes, that you've got some really beautiful Down syndrome people, but you've got those developmental disorders such that that's when you pick up those really nasty ones that will be fatal to the baby. So having in certain countries, some Latin American countries, even some areas in America, in the US, a woman has had her 20-week fetus. You know, this thing, and they're like, oh crap, your baby is not going to survive. If there is a pure ban on anything beyond 20 weeks, that woman is going to be forced to gestate this baby that will not survive. So you can imagine the severe trauma that woman will have to go through, knowing that she's putting all of her physical body into this child. Not many people do go, oh, you know, the baby needs to go. You know, if someone says your baby's going to die, we may as well allow you to abort, because that's not fair on you. It's not fair on anyone else.
I feel as though if they know that the baby's going to die. Sorry, go on.
Kitty said phenotrophic dysplasia or osteogenesis imperfecta. I think it could be those ones. Thank you, Kitty, for that. Gen X says there's a disorder when the internal organs are on the outside. There is a disorder where the brain is on the outside of the skull. There's a disorder called microencephaly, which you probably know about from the Zika virus, where basically the baby, you know, I've seen pictures of babies where it's just like the head's just cut straight off. So, yeah. Anyway, sorry, continue on what you were saying.
No, what I was saying was that it would probably make more sense if, after finding that out, that you would allow the abortion, right? Like that sounds like a very exceptional circumstance to have an abortion.
But there are laws.
Does that not follow for people? I'm like confused. Because if the baby's going to die anyway, I mean, I don't.
It doesn't make any sense. But there are people who genuinely believe that you are murdering a person if you have an abortion, even though the baby's going to die. So.
But what is it? Is it like a religion thing where they'll be like, oh well, you don't know that they're going to die?
I think so. It's more of a all life is sacred attitude,
right? But I'm curious to know how a baby can survive with that disorder. Well, not a baby, but like a fetus can survive with that disorder while it's developing. Does that make sense?
A lot don't. Yeah, a lot don't. Yeah. But also a lot do. And so that baby also ends up being born and they're in severe pain, and then they die a couple of days later. Yeah. And if, like, for those people who are like, let all life is sacred, my argument is that, you know, a life without pain and suffering is sacred.
Yeah, I think that if you truly believe life is sacred, then you wouldn't put the entire life of that person just in incessant pain. From a personal perspective as well, I think that and this is one of the reasons why I find myself just at odds constantly of whether or not I want a child. When people ask me that, it literally causes me anxiety because I don't know if I want a child. First of all, because I think that I think that if you want a child, then you should want to adopt, because there's so many children out there who don't have parents and who need that.
I agree with you on that one.
And I think personally, where I stand right now is that I only want one child. And if I was to have that child, I would more or less, I'm like 80% sure that I'd want to adopt that child. But one of the things that scares me about becoming pregnant and having a child from my own body is the possible chance of that child having a disability. And then all of that, and this is very selfish, all of that falling on me as the blame factor because it came from my body. So yeah, and then there's the whole like philosophical debate of whether or not creating life is something moral, which I've had at length with different people. I mean, it's very hard to argue that it. I think it's very hard to argue that it's not moral, but it's also, I think that there's a lot of harm that comes from having too many kids. You know, like maybe not just the one, but there's definitely a lot of harm that comes from having multiple children. So yeah, I mean, there's that whole debate which we don't need to get into now, but I fully understand the whole argument that if your child, first of all, isn't viable, and then will either live a life of complete pain and agony and disability, like whether or not that is a life worth living. And then there's the argument to be made whether it's your decision or not. But I don't know. I think personally, I wouldn't be able to give birth to a child that I knew was going to be in pain or was going to die instantly. And I don't know whether or not that's a selfish choice.
Well, as I said, I work with people with disability, and a lot of people, if they're in the right, and a lot of people in, and you can probably agree with it, like relate to this, is a lot of people, if they're in the right family, they actually have a wonderful life. Like they actually have a genuinely wonderful life if they're in the right family. That's the thing.
Well, I've seen different spectrums of disorders. The main disability that I personally, in my day-to-day life, that I deal with is ASD or autism. And I've seen different, because autism is also a spectrum, so I've seen different people on loads of different parts of the spectrum. I've seen people who are extremely low functioning, who, you know, are nonverbal, cannot integrate into normal society at all. I think one of the first young people that I worked with was so terrified by the fact that I was a different person in the classroom that she bit me, she threw like her feces at me, she would take off all of her clothes. She was just in this constant state of anxiety and confusion, and you can't blame her for that. You know, it's just how she is. But then I've seen other people on the spectrum who are just completely fine. They're just a little bit socially awkward, and that's fine. Like I feel like even normal people are socially awkward. So, and then I've seen people who are not autistic but have other disabilities which are caused directly by health problems, like their lungs don't function properly or their brain doesn't function properly, so they're restricted to a bed, and they need the only form of pleasure that they can experience is like looking at things. I once worked with a girl who we couldn't let her fall asleep because there was a chance that she would pass out and die. And it's just I couldn't work in that environment for very long because honestly I was just constantly like feeling like, oh, I'm gonna cry, and it's just like not encouraging for a child who's already suffering to see that their care worker has no hope for them. And it's like I can't work in that environment because it just causes me to feel intense pity that I don't want to feel. So I completely understand that argument, and I don't think I would ever argue in favor of like something like eugenics, because again, there is no way of knowing whether someone is like made for the world or not, or whatever you want to call it. But at the same time, it is intense suffering sometimes.
Sometimes. And you touched on something very interesting where you said, I don't know if I could handle the guilt of bringing a child into the world that is disabled. And that's a really interesting thing for me, because I don't know about, because of your culture of growing up, it's a very misogynistic culture, with no offense to you, but
I'm taking it.
No arguments from me. But
that's how I got into this mess.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Tia Lisa said, I fight that part of my depression because of my wrong. Oh, hang on. It's just jumped away. Okay. Sorry. It says, I fight that part of my depression because of my disabilities. After a certain point, I say, please be selfish. A lot of people argue, you know, what about the kid that, you know, could have been born, but you never hear their voice because you're being selfish. And then they completely ignore the fact that there are people who are like, I wish I had been aborted. My life is so shit. I wish I had been aborted.
It's one of those people.
You're one of them.
I have barely anything to complain about, but there have been moments in my life because not for the fact that, you know, I have any disabilities or anything like that, but it's just the case that I was born into a family that was absolutely awful to me from the moment I was born. So anytime, for example, I never said it to her, but anytime my mother was like, I gave birth to you, I would always be like, well, I didn't ask for you to do that, sort of thing.
Exactly.
But I think that for me, and again, I realize that this is selfish, but I think recently I've come to an epiphany that it's not like an astounding one. It's not a breaking news kind of epiphany, but it is an epiphany that I've had within myself and a conversation that I've had within myself that I don't necessarily think that being selfish is a bad thing. And I think that a lot of people have children because they want to be not selfish, you know, they want to be selfless. But at the end of the day, they're not capable parents. And what I come across in my field of work, because I almost exclusively work with people who have disabilities, is that a lot of these parents are in denial of their child having a disability. And it's often from people from my background who will deny that their child is autistic or needs, you know, not special care, but like a little extra help. Like they need extra time on their exams, or they need like a reader or a scribe, or they need to work from a laptop, and simple things like that, that their parents will just outright refuse the child and make their life even more difficult. And then there are parents who will just, you know, it's beyond their means to support this child. And I don't think that it's selfish to say, you know what, I'm outside of my means to look after this child who isn't even a child yet. You know, they're basically just a decision in limbo. So I think I completely get that.
Yeah. Yeah. So this goes a little bit onto something called bodily integrity or bodily autonomy, which I'm sure you're familiar with this argument.
Yeah.
This is the argument I have not encountered anyone being able to argue against. And it's because, and this is just let's be honest, you can't. And the difference between bodily integrity, Cyrus does a much better job at explaining it, but I think basically the argument of bodily autonomy is that I can't be forced to put anything into my body that I don't want, which is what anti-vaxxers use. But bodily integrity is like, you can be forced to put something, i.e. vaccines, into your body because it maintains the integrity of your body as well as the people. So there's a very subtle distinction. I'm not entirely sure how better to explain it, but it brings into account the fact that your bodily integrity is impinged upon if you're pregnant and you don't want to be. So bodily autonomy / integrity is the golden standard for medical ethics. If you if you have a person who says, I don't want this being done to my body, and you force it onto them without the it being, if it's detrimental to that other person, then that's bodily autonomy. But bodily integrity, you can force vaccines onto someone because it is a beneficial thing for this person. So you can't argue bodily autonomy. Bodily autonomy / integrity for pregnancy is if a woman is like, I don't want this baby growing inside of me, it does not matter if you cannot force a person to use their body against their will to support the life of another person. Gold standard medical ethics. In fact, corpses have better bodily autonomy than a pregnant woman, because corpses can, if before a person says, dies, says, I do not want my organs to be harvested, that, and they get done, those organs get harvested, the people doing the harvesting, which I hate that term, but that's what they call it, will end up getting into a lot of trouble. So bodily autonomy is so precious in medical ethics, yet for some reason people are more than willing to ignore that for a pregnant woman. And you can go through all of these sort of the argument is, if a woman didn't, a woman is going out of their way to stop this fetus from growing inside them, and like that's like one of the arguments against it. And it's still like, she still doesn't want it happening. She still doesn't want to be pregnant. You can't force a person. By law, you cannot do it.
I think you're right. I don't think there's many arguments that you can make against that, because again, even if she doesn't get it aborted through a medical way, she could definitely get it aborted in other ways, which are much more dangerous.
Exactly.
But I think the ick factor in that is that there's something else growing inside her, which I kind of understand as an argument, and I kind of understand the whole like, even though like sanctity of life is a little bit stupid because it's all dependent on so many things for it to be actually sacred as a life form. I think that that's what complicates it, and I understand from that. Like, I've seen so many posters that are like, this is your body, and then they'll point to the fetus and say, this is not your body. But it's within your body, so it is part of your body. Yeah. And I guess, like, for me, as someone who is pro-choice, I think for me is like the dividing line of when it would no longer be your choice, I guess. And I think that that's very difficult for me to guesstimate, basically.
And to take it to the logical extreme is that it is your body until you give birth. So
I don't like absolutes. And that sounds like an absolute.
Yeah, I think at a certain point, I do think at a certain point, I'm still figuring it out, but I think probably an 8-month-old fetus, is a definite. And like, as I said, even for me, the 24 to 26 week is kind of like the part where I'm like, but if it's an 8.5-month-old fetus, don't do that unless there's something seriously wrong.
Well, I mean, the only
because sometimes abnormalities don't come up until
I think the only exceptional circumstance would be if the mother's life is at risk, and then get rid of it. But I'm definitely sold on 24 weeks because that sounds more logical than just being like, 20 weeks. But again, there's like so much the gray area, and honestly, for me, as someone who's first of all works in education, and second of all has actually raised children, I think I'm too close to it to be unbiased. So like I've raised,
that's fine.
Yeah, I've raised my siblings, and my mother, for example, there's 6 of us. First of all, she desperately didn't want to have my last sibling, and I think that she, towards the end of her life, carried a lot of guilt because she didn't want to have my last sibling. And then I can't remember exactly what happened, but I think she tried to take like an abortion pill, and for whatever reason it didn't work. and she was really scared that because it didn't work, that my brother would have a lot of would be disfigured or disabled in some way. Thankfully, he's fine, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with him. But I think she carried a lot of guilt because she didn't want to have him.
Yeah, and that there's no with the RU486. That's what we call that abortion pill or misoprostol or however you pronounce it. It's there's no connection to that in a disability if you take it.
Yeah, I did tell her that. But she was still like, well, you don't know. And I was like, no,
yeah,
I
and I
do.
understand. Yeah. But I can understand that worry as well. So it's irrational but understandable in my opinion. Yes. So there's a lot of things. Did you I'm assuming you watched that video that I sent you with the because there's one thing that never gets talked about which needs to be talked about, and that is why criminalizing abortions sends women to jail for having a miscarriage. Because there are at least from last time it was about 30 women in jail in South America, which has a total ban of criminalization of up to 30 years for having an abortion. First of all, having an abortion and having a miscarriage is completely you can't tell the difference at all. If a woman has an abortion or has a miscarriage and you inspect her, inspect the woman, you can't tell the difference between the two. And then you've got the first girl, I can't remember her name, that I talked about. She was being repeatedly raped. So she also had that. Most of the women who are sent to jail for having an abortion were usually lower socioeconomic, had been abused, because you had Rennie Gibbs. She was a 16-year-old girl who was also a cocaine addict, who had the baby. She miscarried. She got sent to jail for over a year, I think, because the idea is that her cocaine addiction was the cause of the miscarriage, where experts went, well, there was no cocaine in that baby's system, but it had the umbilical cord wrapped around its neck, which can cause spontaneous abortions, which is miscarriages. She got sent to jail. And we don't talk about the fact all the focus was on the baby, but very rarely do we actually talk about the women. The health problems with having a baby, and people go, oh, it's just 6 months of 9 months of inconvenience, and you're fine. And it's like, well, not really. Earlier on in the chat,
it's so much more than that. I mean, speaking as someone who's never been pregnant, but has been witness to several pregnancies with my mother, because me and my mother, though we weren't close, I did have a lot of involvement with her and her healthcare and her bullshit, if I'm being completely honest. There's an argument to be made that it wasn't completely her fault, because there was religion involved and there was my father involved. But pregnancy, first and foremost, is not an easy thing to go through. It's 9 months of essentially taking care of another human being that you have not seen, met, or heard of before, and they are constantly feeding off you almost like a parasite. And
technically speaking,
you give birth to it. Yeah, I mean, I think on a very basic level,
extraordinarily traumatic.
Yeah, and to it, and every year that goes by, it gets harder and harder to raise it because it learns things. It's like the way that, for me, every time, and I don't want to be the downer here. I'm not trying to tell people not to have babies. Every time a friend comes up to me and is just like, I think I'm ready to have a baby, I'm just like viscerally angry about it. Because I'm like, you are not ready to have a child.
Yeah.
Because it's cute, and that's how it lures you into taking care of it. Like that, literally, it's an evolutionary process. Because if it was disgusting, the amount of pain and sacrifice that you put into it is just suddenly not worth it. Especially as and that's why you find that babies of any kind, be it animal or human being, you find it cute because it makes you want to take care of it. It makes it satisfactory to take care of it. Like, I'm not trying to minimize it, but it really is it's just something biological. And I think that a lot of men, especially, but also women who've never experienced a pregnancy, will just treat it as though it's something simple and everybody can do it. And
it's not. It's absolutely
it just
not.
isn't. It just isn't. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, just as an awareness thing, is that I don't fully
Can I quickly jump
understand.
in?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Jesus is raised. I'm reading the side chat. Women's bodies are not designed to have children. First of all, evolution is not a design. There is no such thing as a design for evolution in the sense of someone sticking things together. And if we were designed, the designer should be shot. We are not designed. We just are able to.
He really
we are
should
able to. He really should be. I have a serious hip injury because of the shitty design that person did.
And I have polycystic ovaries, so that's another shitty design. All of us have periods, and that's a shitty design. And not everyone can have children. Not everyone can have children. So he must have been debunked.
And also, do we want to go into the complications of what happens to women just in the easy pregnancy? Like, seriously, the pain that women go through, the fact that their entire body literally starts sort of becoming loose. Like, there's a hormone that gets released that sort of allows women, that sort of loosens up the ligaments of the woman's body. So, they're more prone to injury. You've got permanent damage almost every single time.
I think before recent like medical development, the rate of death for women going through childbirth was just so much higher than it is now. And that's why I'm so against like people having like at home like fucking doula births. Like it really bothers me that people do that, because the one reason why the rate of giving birth to a child and you not dying is so low is because of advances in medical science. And while I did say that science is not my subject and I'm very intimidated by it, I appreciate that is the case, you know? And I think another thing, I think there was a video, this is kind of a sidetrack, but to continue the conversation about the design thing, I think a few weeks ago, there was this video circulating around everybody's YouTube recommended about a cat giving birth. And it gave birth to like 5 kittens. And me being just living on YouTube all the time, I watched this video of a cat giving birth. It's about 20 minutes long. And this cat's birth was just so much simpler than a human birth. And this cat gave birth to several babies. Like, it wasn't even just a case of it giving birth to one. And it's just like, okay, we're at the top of the food chain. Human beings are like so much more advanced. If we had a designer, would we not have a simpler birth process? Like, this cat was just like power thrusting out babies. Like, or
you have really koalas or pouched animals like koalas and kangaroos. They just, it's like, if we had the same ratio, our babies would be about that big. We just go, there we go.
And marsupials giving birth is like pure survival of the fittest, because they give birth to like hundreds of them, and then whoever makes it. And I think that's a way better system, by the way. It shouldn't be dependent on the conception of one egg. I think that it should be a case of like conceiving 1,000 eggs, and then whoever's the strongest makes it.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But no, the damage done, like it's sort of so women's bodies may seem to be designed, but it's not at all. There is always some form of damage, and it's not. Sometimes it's not evident straight off, but I did see earlier on in the chat that there was a person had a patient who's who is at age, like stage of end of life for their heart. They have a heart problem due to their pregnancy from 15 years ago. You've got things like prolapses, which is where basically the vagina falls out, like your womb, your bits fall out of your vagina. You've got incontinence. There is, sometimes when it's a particularly bad birth, it can tear your bladder, so you're incontinent for the rest of your life unless you have surgery. You can get fistulas. You can get tears, which tears from your vagina all the way up to your anus from giving birth. You've got so many things. Then you've got it's just not it's just not nice. And people go, oh, but it's just 9 months worth of inconvenience. No, it's not 9 months worth of inconvenience.
I think that people perpetuate this idea that women's bodies are designed for birth because men can't give birth, and they think it's like that simple. That's what it seems like. Anyway.
Jesus is raised. I can see what you're saying. It's sort of, you're saying it just shows that humans are flawed. You're going, just because it is not how you want doesn't mean there's an error. I'm sorry, Jesus, we are actually talking about evolution here. We're not talking about design. It doesn't matter how many people are on the planet. I am asking you to at least listen to what we're trying to say. If you are not willing to learn, I will ask you to be timed out, because I'm sorry. I do like free speech and everything like that. However, I'm quite convinced you're a troll trying to bait, but you are bringing up some really good points. But yeah, evolution's a thing, dude. It's a thing. Please understand that. We're talking about the sanctity of a living human being, not a fetus that is not alive. If you actually started listening from the beginning of the stream, I think you would have actually understood where I'm coming from. So thank you very much. If you would like to start from the beginning, please do so. If you are not willing to listen to our arguments and just want to tell us how we feel, how we should think and how we should feel, I would suggest that you go. And fetus does not mean small child, by the way. It means fetus. Small child is a infant. All right. Anyway, let's continue on. So what were some other things that you were
wanted to understand,
you were a bit confused on?
Yeah. So as someone who's never actually had a pregnancy scare, never actually had to go through any kind of abortion, what I want to understand is what actually happens, because I think the sort of drama that I've seen when talking about abortions is that the way that doctors perform the abortions is that like they like stab the baby in the head or something like that. Like I've heard this before. And then I know that there's a style, like a type of abortion where you like cut the umbilical cord and then that's it. I don't know. Like, I don't know how it works. So that's what I wanted to know.
All right. There's the majority, something like 99% of abortions happen before 12 weeks or something like that. And the majority of those times is what's called a dilate and cure it. And so basically, because I've had one of those done for myself where, because not that I was pregnant, but because I had something come up with my bits down below. I won't go into it, but it was sort of like there's a 5% chance I could have had cancer. Turned out I didn't. So basically what they do is they dilate the the cervix, and they just basically put an instrument up, and they just kind of scrape around the inside of the womb or the uterus, and just remove all the debris and then take it all out. So it's also called a dusting and cleaning as well. That's one of the colloquial terms. I know, but it's called a dilate and curette. I know, it's terrible. So that's the vast majority of them. Also, if you are able to get a medical abortion, which is the abortion pill, which is misoprostol or something or other, basically that just triggers your body to just get rid of the baby.
Is that the same as the morning after
the abortion
pill?
drug is? No, the morning after pill is a massive hit of progesterone, if I remember correctly, which stops the implantation of the egg into the ovaries. Not into the ovaries, no, the implantation of the egg into the lining of the uterus. Yeah, so it is not an abortifacient, because the abortifacient is is like the RU486 drug, because it causes you to miscarriage.
So how
the morning after pill doesn't.
Okay.
The misoprostol, something or other. I don't even know the name of the drug, so you're probably asking the wrong person. I don't know how it works, to be honest with you. So I probably should look into that. But the morning after pill is a massive hit of, I think it's progesterone, where the body just goes, oh, I'm ready to have a period. Yeah, that's basically it. The later stage abortions are a little bit different. Like the very late stage ones where you've got a fairly well-developed fetus, it's a little bit more icky. But the ones where they're like, they chop the baby up and suck the baby out. If they do that, I can't really. I'm not so sure on this late state, because I've been like, I haven't really looked too much into it. But those ones where they disassemble the baby, I suppose, is usually due to the fact of them being quite well developed, and but the fetus has died. So so that's it's violent. Like you can never not have a violent abortion of a late stage, because you've got to somehow get that child out, like the fetus out of the womb. To
be fair, but childbirth in and of itself is violent. So,
exactly.
I mean, but I remember when my mother. I'm sorry, I have like all these childhood stories that are just wonderful. But when my mother had her miscarriage, I remember her talking about that, because it basically the baby had died, but for some reason her womb wasn't like sending it out, basically. Like she got no contractions, and there was no like she wasn't even bleeding. She wasn't even bleeding. She just went to her ultrasound and they told her that there was no heartbeat, and the baby, although it hadn't like completely calcified, there was some evidence of calcification, so they had to like chop it up and take it out. And I remember her like just like it was like a harrowing experience for her, because she saw all the pieces
and
of
it would be
and she went through a significant
Gen X does
depression.
As you would. Gen X says Nevada is rare that late term abortion happens. Yes, it's true. I think it's only like 1% or 0.1% or something. I can't remember off the top. And Sean W makes a good point. Okay, so Tia Lisa says, I've only heard of the disassembly, the baby has died. And Sean W says that's because of the propaganda against abortion. There is so much propaganda against abortion. You know, the little baby feet going, oh, this is what you're killing. And it's like, as I said, 99% of abortions are before 20 weeks and 12 weeks or something.
But
and it's always because of
to know. I was curious to know, because I didn't know how much of it was propaganda, because I've seen the like little diagrams that they have at sexual health clinics about how abortions happen. But when you see the stuff online about like, I think the most common one that I've seen is that they like wrench the baby's head out with a knife or whatever, which I mean, that seems like it's stupid. Like, I don't even know how you would do that anatomically.
All right. Well, let's put it into perspective.
Yeah.
So let's put this into perspective. For every single time you see a picture of a almost fully developed baby being ripped from its mother's wombs because of those evil heathen bitches who are evil, make that one and then think 99 are a splodge.
Yeah.
Like, they're so rare. They absolutely are so rare, and if they do happen, it's due to the health of the mother or due to the health of the baby. So on very, very rare occasions, if a mother might be 7.5 months pregnant and they find that she has an aggressive cancer, like a really aggressive cancer that they need to get rid of now or she will die, they will go, you're having an abortion, we need to save your life. And that goes back to the medical ethics that I was talking about earlier. The life of a person is more important than the life of a fetus, because, if the person is dead, so is the fetus. Or if the person is dead, the fetus doesn't have a mother. And if the mother, so there's so many reasons why late-term abortions happen, and none of them are actually due to just the mother changing their mind. And like, it's cruel, in my opinion. It's massively cruel to say to a woman, you are, you're evil and awful person and selfish for aborting your child late term. And here's this woman who's just had a miscarriage. That's effectively, even if the baby was healthy and she needed to have an abortion because she was going to die, like, that's still a miscarriage. It's a wanted baby. At that point, the mother wants that child, unless, of course, you're in that extremely rare situation where you find out you're pregnant when you give birth. That child is wanted at that point. And it's heart fucking breaking. And anti-abortionist propaganda is you know what I'm trying to say. It's disgusting.
Yeah. It is.
That propaganda. So so that the propaganda is, for every mostly developed child that you see, there's 99 other abortions where it's just a blob.
Yeah. I hear that. Okay.
Do you have any other questions, or?
That's more or less what
was
I
that,
wanted
sorry?
to know.
All right. Did it make you clear up anything?
I mean, I think there'll always be a gray area with abortion, because I think the thing that people who are like pro-life or anti-abortion, I think they're in a mindset where they think that we want to kill babies. I think they're in that mindset, and I don't know why exactly. But
it's to ironically, to dehumanize and to make people who are pro-choice
of
evil.
Course. Of course,
it's to dehumanize pro-choice.
But I do feel as though a lot of their propaganda is geared in that way, to present people who are pro-choice as people who just actively want to kill their babies. I think that most of the women who are pro-choice, most of the ones that I have come across, typically they use contraception and they try to prevent pregnancies as much as possible. I think that abortion is definitely like a last resort kind of thing. I don't think it's just like, oh, I'm pregnant, I'm gonna get an abortion. I don't think it's like that. I think
Yeah.
it's a difficult decision, and I think that the fact that it's a difficult decision gives weight to the fact that contraceptives are important, which is a whole other
Mm.
conversation. Um,
Mm.
but I think the gray area will always be like me being egocentric and just being like, well, I don't think I could ever do it, you know? But just because
Well,
I wouldn't be
that's
able to do
okay.
it, but just because I wouldn't be able to do it does not necessarily mean I should take that choice away from everyone else. I think that's my point.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
so yeah, I think that choice is just really important. And as me, as someone who is a libertarian and believes that, your body, your voice, you get to do whatever you want with that. Like I will support euthanasia to my dying day. Because I do genuinely believe that if someone is suffering and they don't want to live anymore, that is their choice to make. Um,
Mm.
and nobody should be able to take that away
Yeah.
from them. Unfortunately, I think most countries
Mm.
will deny people that. Um,
Yeah.
so me being a libertarian, it would just be very against my own sort of values to be like, oh, you're carrying a baby, there's no way you can get rid of it, even though it's within the domain of your body and you
Mm.
have autonomy over that. It just doesn't make
Yeah.
sense
And it,
for me to be against that.
well, the thing is, the irony is that a lot of people who are pro-life or pro-birth, as
Mm.
I think is more an accurate term, are also often against things like sex education, contraception, social things like free lunches at schools, free schooling,
Yeah.
you know, better maternity leave in the US. They're against maternity leave. So it is clearly their attitude is more, hey, let's punish the woman rather than punish the
I
it's
think it
a
also
it's a
stems a lot
punishment. It is,
from
and I have actually
I think it also stems a lot from religion. I think religion is the main driver for
it
that. Yeah, and I think punish
I
the
would
woman
agree
is
with you on that one.
definitely is definitely an idea that comes from religion. Like this is her fault, so she should suffer for it. Which in many instances, I think fault is a very harsh term for
Mm,
becoming pregnant. Um, so I mean, it takes two. The man isn't punished in the same way, but
exactly.
yeah. So I don't know. It just and I think
Mm.
like
And
I've
then
made
and
these
then they
arguments. Me coming from a spiritual place, like I used to question things even when I was spiritual, and I would talk about these things. And I'm never going to come out and say that Islam is better than any other religion because it isn't. It's just as bad. But there are certain things in Islam, for example, that if the mother's life is in danger, that giving birth would put her in danger, then you err towards the mother getting an abortion. You get rid of the child because the mother is the priority.
mm,
And again, like you said, it's the same reasoning that with the mother, there's a viable child, but with the child, if you force the birth, then both of them will die. It's a lose-lose situation. Um,
mm,
but I do think that there is a
mm.
lot of, I think there's a lot of, oh, we can forgive men because they'll live with the guilt of getting this woman pregnant, which in a lot of instances is not the case. But you have to punish the woman because she's the one carrying the child and she has to go through
Vibrantly
with it.
Brantley, I've been yeah, Vibrantly Brantley has been spamming about Paula White's Trump's spiritual advisor talks about this praying to miscarriage all the satanic babies, and I'm like, well, that's really pro-life of you. I did watch it. It is bizarre because she also tries
Mm-hmm.
and brings God's wrath down on like animal kingdoms. What? Like,
What did animals do? But
oh,
also,
exactly.
I remember seeing something that probably came out of America at this point. But I remember seeing some politician or the other saying that a fetus or a zygote won't attach to a woman's womb unless she wants it to. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I can't.
like
It,
in the
the
instance of like rape, it was around the Alabama abortion thing, right?
yeah.
And he said something like that. It's really
like,
dumb.
and all of these women are like, oh, what about the time I got pregnant when I got raped?
It's awful.
Yeah, it is awful.
Where do these ideas come from?
It's a good question.
Where did...
Before we wrap up, I just do want to actually have a bit of an anecdotal story. I had a friend. She thought she was infertile, and she hooked up with a guy. She started dating this guy who turned extraordinarily violent. She was going through severe amounts of abuse, and she actually ended up pregnant with him. She had an abortion because, like, she broke it off with him and then she found out she was pregnant. So she ended up having an abortion. People who are pro-choice would have forced her to go through that pregnancy, which meant that she would have had her abuser in her life for the rest of her life. Imagine doing that. Imagine forcing a person going through that. It also turned out that she was pregnant with twins, but she had an ectopic pregnancy, so she would have had to abort anyway, which was
ectopic
good,
isn't viable.
The ectopic means it goes outside of the womb, so it's and often it's most usually in the fallopian tube, but it can actually be outside of the fallopian tube and actually in the abdominal cavity. It's very, 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 very rare. But that's something that was talked about. Yeah, but it's not a viable baby. It will die. The baby, like the fetus, will die, and probably take the woman through with it as well. Another example of fantastic, terrible design.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
Anyway, but it's sort of just like that's, the pro-birthers are don't like those. They don't like those stories.
No, they can't, because they can't. There's nothing they can do besides agree that that's a terrible idea. I mean, someone who came from a fundamentalist background. I mean, I used to argue this a lot because I was on the pro-life side because I believed in the sanctity of life and all of those things. But I remember quite vividly remembering someone, just screaming in my face, like, what if you get raped and you get pregnant and then you have to have that rapist's child? And me being ignorant of how the world works, I was kind of like, well, it's not the baby's fault. And it isn't the baby's fault that their father was a terrible human being. But because of the way that the law works, like in terms of visitation and things like that, that would mean that that violent human being is always going to be in the life of both the child and the mother. And I think that that's just...
And
I don't know, it's just awful.
And also, someone put in, I can't see it in the chat now, but someone put in that there are some states in the US that allow adoption. I think it was adoption rights for women who parent, like visiting rights or something as well, like forced visiting.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like,
Someone
it's
needs
sort of
to write
the
like a
callous
novel about
disregard
that.
of the woman.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's the callous disregard of the woman.
It is.
Anyway, so I'm going to finish this stream because we've been going for an hour and a half. I hope.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on. I hope I cleared up some things.
You did.
Anyway. Yeah. Thank you for coming on. I'm such a big fan of
lessons.
you. You are amazing.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I definitely had a lot of like queries. I think there's a bit of a lag. I definitely had like a lot of queries and often like I'll read about these things and there's only so much that I retain because again my brain isn't cut out for science in a sense. Because I'm just like very nuanced, and what happens is when I read something very factual, my mind just wanders into like imagination land. It's just like, oh, what if this? And it's just like,
Yeah.
no, stay on this. This is what it is. So sometimes I just need like, aside
Try,
from
try
me
try reading.
aloud. So
Yeah.
aside from reading, I just need someone
Try
to like
reading
what?
yeah, sit down and explain it. Yeah, like I was just saying, just try
Yeah.
reading a a, a scientific paper on the evolution of a particular microbe, and they're going, oh, this gene Z5236. I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? Like,
Well, I've
I'm
been
trained in reading this
yeah.
shit, and I still have no idea.
It's like very convoluted, and sometimes the language is also hard to grasp. But
Yeah.
recently I've been, because I have an interest in like dinosaurs and things, because that's just, I can let my mind wander. I've been watching a lot of videos about all the different extinctions that have happened. And it's
Mm,
very like interesting, but at the same time I'm just
mm,
like, oh, the sort of life finds a way kind of thing. And I'm always brought back to that moment where Ian Malcolm in Jurassic Park is just like, just because you should doesn't mean you should. Just because you could doesn't mean you should. Um,
yeah.
and it's just like, and that's why like the whole my argument is that you have to have a good reason for having a kid. I'm sorry, you have to have a good reason for having one. Otherwise,
Mm,
why are
mm,
you doing it? So
yeah.
yeah,
And the ongoing effects of a woman who hasn't had a pregnancy can last for hundreds of years. For a woman who wants to have an abortion but wasn't able to get it, the ongoing effects
yeah,
can actually last for hundreds of years.
yeah.
Like
And
if
I think that.
especially like abuse is passed down through the generations.
Mhm. And even
So
if it is a case
yeah.
of like, for example, in my family, it's just assumed that you'll want a kid because my family are quite backward and conservative. Not politically, just in everything else. Um, and I think that that assumption is also very toxic, that women just automatically want children because they can
Mm,
have children. And for me, it's led to just a bucket load of psychological problems because of the way that I was raised, and also bucket loads of psychological problems for all of my siblings because of the way that they were raised. Like, it's not easy to look after
mm,
one child, let alone several. Um, so,
yeah. Yeah.
I think that if you're not ready, just don't do it. Just don't do it. Um,
Exactly.
there's plenty of children to
All
go
right.
around. That's it. That's my message.
Yeah. Anyway, on that note, thank you
Yeah.
very much for joining. So, can you tell everybody who you are, where you're from, what you do, that sort of thing?
So I'm Fay the Most Gracious. I have a YouTube channel. I also have a Twitter that I'm trying not to be very active on because I don't think it's good for me. But I'm dragged back to the land of Twitter, kicking and screaming every now and then because I need to be there. We had a few demonstrations recently for No Hijab Day, which is something I also wanted to address, but it's not the appropriate place or time right now. But I talk a lot about women's issues. I come from a Muslim background, so I talk a lot about Islam and Muslim-related issues. And I sometimes have fun. We just chill out sometimes, and that's my channel. I'm not an extremely scientific person, if you couldn't tell. So you shouldn't join my channel for that reason. But if you are interested in, learning about Islam, learning about some history, having some fun every now and then, I'm pretty much a very average kind of YouTuber kind of character, but I like delving into like politics and these kinds of issues that I don't fully understand, and I will be the first one to admit that I don't fully understand them, and I want to learn about them. So that's my whole channel. It's just confusing.
Yeah. And so, for those of you who aren't, I think most of you know who I am, but if you don't know who I am, my name's Meredith. My channel's name is Navadia. I do mainly atheist stuff and some scientific stuff as well. This week, yesterday, I premiered a video of how I became Christian, which was totally a bloody
ill-received.
satire, but some people actually took it seriously. It's like, no,
I saw that.
like
Is that
the
the one
majority
where
of
you
people,
speak in
though, to be
tongues?
fair, that took it seriously actually hadn't seen the video. So no, I'm
Oh my god, I need to do
no,
that
that
on
was
my
last
channel.
week's. That was also so cringeworthy. Anyway, I also do a couple of sciencey stuff. I'm thinking of doing another science one in the next couple of weeks or
You
so.
should
So
do
I'm
more
not sure.
science stuff. You should do more science.
I
I
will.
enjoy your science videos the most because I honestly don't consume a lot of atheist content because it just makes me angry most of the time, and that's just
Fair
something I
enough.
need to keep down. But I do enjoy the
Yeah.
more educational videos. So yeah, I mean, I'm not saying you need to base your content off of what I want, but
Yeah.
I would enjoy more science videos.
All right, I'll try and do that. Did you watch the testicle video? Oh, that was actually a fairly popular one.
The testicle video? No. I'm moving more and more because okay, the thing that I do the most on YouTube is just watch dumb compilations of stupid videos. That's what I do, and I'm trying to like curve it into a more like beneficial route. So I've just gotten into like the educational sector of YouTube where I'm mostly learning about dinosaurs, but also other stuff.
Yeah,
So yeah, and like
yeah,
again, like
fair enough.
I'm not very scientifically literate, so I'm a well-read person. Like I'm very cultured. I read a lot of literature and I discover a lot of art. But when it comes to science, I definitely think I need a visual or audio medium to learn from
Mm.
it. So I'm doing my best to pick it up that way because I'm also doing a science as a degree and I'm finding it very challenging, but in a good way. So yeah,
Mm.
I'm doing my best, but I will check that out. I mean, it's always a good day to learn about testicles.
It was a
Yeah.
really fun video to do.
Okay, great.
Yes, it's the one that says I'm. It was the one that I've titled "I ballsed up." So yeah, it was like 2 weeks ago. So yeah.
Excellent.
It was a really fun video, actually. All right. Well, I'm going to end the stream. Thank you very much, everyone who joined in. Oh, and just another Southern Atheist just says, well, if you become a $35 patron, she'll be amenable to a topic you come up with within reason, of course. Yes, I just had a
Listen,
Patreon.
as opposed to common belief, I am not being paid by the Zionists, so I don't have that kind of money.
Fair
Not
enough.
like the rest of my friends. Anyway.
All right. Well, I'm going to end the stream. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. Do you have a sign-up tag?
Sorry?
Do you say something at the end of every video to say see you later?
I mean, it's my birthday in 5 days, and I have a wish list. That's.
All right. All right. Well,
really
leave that to me, and I'll put it in the description below.
Thank you.
Anyway,
I appreciate that.
I hope you all have a lovely day, evening, night, whatever, and don't forget, don't give yourself the raw prawn. Bye, everyone. Bye.